Hi, everyone. This is George Haddon, founder of PauseFest and Awards, and you're tuned into Breakthrough Sessions 2024. We're all about the clever ideas that push boundaries, and for the next couple of months, we're bringing you some of the sharpest minds in the business to talk about what's happening right now. Every Friday at 1 p.m. from September 6th to October 25th, we're live for 30 minutes, just enough time to give you some serious insights without pulling you away from your busy day. So let's dive in, get inspired, and most of all, let's break through together. Today's session, Scaling Smart, Adaptive Culture for Growing Companies. Learn how to effectively manage the challenges and opportunities that come with scaling a growing business, understanding Gen Z, and how to create authentic connections. Our speakers today, Deepak Singh, Senior People and Culture Manager at Uber Carshare, recognized as a top emerging culture creator, an award-winning HR leader, shapes workplace cultures through kindness and compassion. Kate Thompson, Group Strategy Director at Hardie Grant Media, brings over 15 years of experience in brand marketing and communication strategy. She plays a pivotal role in shaping strategic direction within the global media and publishing group at Hardie Grant. And Ryan McMurray, Chief Experience Officer at Wake by Reach, has over a decade of experience with the Reach Foundation. Initially a facilitator of emotional well-being programs, he now leverages his people and culture expertise to enhance workplace environments, driving emotional skills development in business through Wake by Reach. Welcome, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great to
Thanks.
be here.
Awesome. Culture. Love this topic. And finally, I have yesterday going through some recordings, and I wanted to, before I ask you a question, I want to share something. Basically, a quotes that I've discovered from 2020 Pause Fest. It was from Miles Orking. I'm not sure if you've been at that particular event, but it was our last big event, and we had this amazing speaker, chief of staff at Google Cloud Apps UX from San Francisco. He came down and he was the only one that did UX rap song live. But here are some interesting quotes from him, and it might resonate with you. And I thought just maybe to read five of them that kind of really stuck with me. Happy people, happy products, happy world. Psychological safety is the number one factor in making for a successful team. Leaders must be intentional about creating emotional connection. It doesn't happen by accident. Emotion matters. It matters to your relationships at home. It matters at work. And if we ignore it, we suffer. And one that I actually originally just wanted to mention is culture is not something you consume, it's something you create. So I wanted to share that with you, and I wanted to then launch into asking you, Kate, about how has Hardie Grant maintained such a strong culture as it grew from a smaller agency to a national network with over 100 staff right now.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've been reflecting quite a lot in preparation for this sort of thinking that I might get a few questions about Hardie Grant Media, and I realised I've worked in the organisation nearly 9 years. So when you've got that amount of time to reflect on the journey, there's a lot of dramatic change. And as when I started, we were 10 or 20 people. Today, there's 4 agencies. We're also part of the Hardie Grant Group. So when you think about the bigger team, we cohabitate in the same office. There's about 300 of us across the globe. So Melbourne's our head office, Sydney, Brisbane, etc. Back to the days when I joined in 2015, we were a really founder-led business and quite an organic organisation. A lot of you are probably familiar with that, maybe working in your own sort of organisations and startups or smaller shops. Everything was really verbal in terms of how we got things done, and 100% of the energy, while we cared about, I think, the people and all of that, it was more about the work, trying to do really good quality work for our clients, and then finding more new clients. There was no investment or documentation in things like brand, values, vision, and the sorts of things that I think start to become a lot more important as you grow and engage a larger workforce. So we've essentially had to grow up and without being too corporate, I guess, sort of document all of those things that help us to maintain our essence and share those stories across teams that are fragmented across the East Coast in particular. The first piece of work we did was our values. That's one of the first jobs I did with Nick Hardie Grants. They thread through the entire organisation, show up in lots of different places. We've got them in our recruitment guides through to goal setting and performance, for example. We've established a people and culture function. So there's actually dedicated roles in the business. And you're about to hear from Deepak here, who's probably in a role similar to what I'm describing. There's 3 staff in this team, and their remit's much broader than recruitment. It really is trying to understand the employee experience and how engaged they are, seeking feedback, inviting them in, and sort of using that to act on the future of the organisation. We've got engagement committees and working groups and all sorts of things. And it's really exciting hearing from the voice of the people and shaping the future of the business on our journey to become B Corp certified, or how we tackle AI, or our reconciliation action plan. And more recently, the work I'm most proud of in my role, it's more in a strategic communications and planning function. We did a lot of work on our master brand and landed on this proposition that's actually now became the vision of the company, which is where emerging ideas thrive. It's become a real North Star for us. And internally, we do things like hosting company-wide hack days, inviting people in, cracking real briefs. We've got a big idea competition where we're asking them for thoughts on business cases and investing in bringing those ideas to life. And externally, we do some cool stuff as well in sort of partnership with Soon Futures. So I think all of that documentation and inviting people in has been very central. And then the way that we plan, the common theme is bringing lots of different perspectives around the table. That psychological safety, valuing different people's voices. Our strategic planning's become a very highly collaborative session where we've got 20-25 people across different senior leadership roles coming together to really tackle, well, what is the future and how do we progress? Because we're a network now with subcultures sitting in specific agencies. Some teams are bigger in, say, Sydney versus Melbourne. And that session's allowed us to all have a shared narrative and sort of play out to the teams at all layers where we're going, why it's important. So, yeah, for me, I think it's been the communication, documenting and getting serious about all that important stuff, and just being really consistent to anchoring it back to something like a proposition or that's really meaningful, and helping inject meaning into that with different activations throughout the course of the calendar year.
Amazing. So it's really been a great journey of documenting culture and propagating that across the agency so that everyone is on the same page. And you said, just out of the context, there's over 100 people in Hardie Grant, but there's also 5 agencies. And so,
Mhm.
can you just share how many people per company agency as a group? Because it's all
Yeah.
divided in segments, right?
Yeah. So 110 all up. So our creative and we've got a central team. So there's 5 of us sitting centrally. I guess you'd call that sort of shared services or group level type roles. We've got a creative and content agency where there's probably about 25 people. Our digital marketing agency would be hovering around 40, 45, I think. Maybe even bigger, actually, over 50. And then we've got a PR agency, which is just over 10, and then a creative production team, which is about 5 people at the moment. I don't know if that quite gets up to 110. My numbers are probably a little off, but definitely skewing more into the creative and content side of things with the heads and tails business. And then the acquisition of Reload Media sort of injected a lot of people, which is that sort of 50 odd number.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that. Um, Talking about the acquisitions and yet another way of, I guess, merging two cultures and the magic that comes out of it, but it's not simple bringing two very different cultures together. Deepak, you said in this seat trying to um, get car next door into Uber culture. Um, how have you approached this integration into two distinct workplace cultures to create a more cohesive and thriving environment there?
Really good question. And I think before, or as I sort of think of the best way to answer that, let me set the scene a little bit. So my role or I was brought in to, I guess, accelerate and lead that integration process between what was Car Next Door and became Uber Carshare into Uber. And as most of us know today, that Uber Carshare brand doesn't exist anymore. Uber did decide to, I guess, kill it off in the nicest possible way. But while I was there, and initially both parties really intended to make this integration work and work seamlessly. So my role was really focused on making this integration as effective as possible. And then start to answer your question, firstly, just recognizing the dynamics. So Uber's this 100,000 person company, which acquired Car Next Door, which became Carshare, which is a 450 person company. Ways of working, cultures, everything were total opposites, and rightfully so. But just as importantly, this wasn't just a merger of sorts. Carshare was acquired by Uber. So the Carshare team needed to adapt into Uber's culture. And that's something we had to recognize quite quickly and make the most of. So my goal was really to ensure this, I guess, adaptation or adoption happened smoothly while still preserving what was our story. And, the reality is no relationship works when it's one way. So I think the best way I can answer this without repeating what Kate said is just think really practically. And in the 12 months, if I break it down quarter by quarter, quarter one was really about accelerating and aligning actions that delivered value. So what were the existing similarities to align with quickly? What values aligned? What did we want to do? We both said we wanted to take 1 million cars off the road. That's our shared vision. But also ensured people felt, sorry, is that a question? No. Um, it is important to ensure that people felt that any changes was a manageable steps and not a daunting leap. So in that quarter one, it is really about accelerating actions that are already identified or in play so that we could build trust and really have impact. And then ensure that we could simplify things so that leaders that were managing people, especially leaders managing people that were, I guess, seconded across teams, weren't doing two different processes at two different times for the same outcome or action. So things like media reviews, promotions process, um, emphasis on the manager relationship and one-on-one meeting cadence was really important and aligning that. Then from that, if I look at quarter two, we aimed at identifying impactful actions for that smooth change. And I got the opportunity to, I guess, be a bit creative and apply a really unique approach. So I layered traditional people data with business strategy, financial performance, our external reputation. And with that information, I guess I was able to paint a fuller picture of what was happening and needed to happen. And then in turn predict and I guess set directives for the change ahead, which brought us into Q3. And that was really about key process alignment and really driving the things that drive impact. So one of the biggest things we did or identified was we needed to update the way performance was rewarded and recognized. So we aligned actions from go to woe from team members, managers, the HR teams, executives, how calibrations went, approvals and messaging so that both teams were working in the same way. Even though we didn't have the same tools, we were working in the same way. So once again, it wasn't a leap to take, it was just a few steps. And that fourth quarter was all about driving that integration. So leading that integration with Carshare to Uber. And that included that organizational design of at least 8 teams, and that was about 450 people. So those realignments, redeployments. There's an unfortunate piece of redundancies that came with it where there's some roles doubled up, but driving those promotions and transfers as well. And changing those things like HRISs. So I think to answer that most practically, how we did it or what we sort of looked at, I think simply put, it was focusing on what we wanted to achieve together and back to that mission or that shared mission and vision, and really driving clear and transparent communication around that so that once again, it wasn't a cliff to jump off. And when that change happened, people were prepared and ready to make that decision as well.
Thank you for sharing that. That's trying to summarize something that's pretty complex in a short amount of time is a challenge. But thanks for sharing a little bit of what was happening. And we have only 30 minutes here. Ryan, I wanted to jump over to you and start talking more about the people. Um, would love to understand, and if you can share a little bit more. You're surrounded with Gen Z a lot, and if you can share how can managers better understand and engage with Gen Z, and what are some common misconceptions about the newest generation in the workplace?
Yeah, so maybe just to give a quick bit of context, I represent the Reach Foundation, a youth organisation based out of Melbourne that has been working with young people and trying to empower them to live better lives for the last 30 years. So we, about probably 10 or so years ago, kind of thought, what can we do with that knowledge that we have of young people, that really deep kind of connection that we've had to young people in Australia right throughout this sort of 30-year period. And we started a talk called Motivating the Millennials. And it went really well because there are a lot of businesses struggling to work out, how do you motivate your millennials? What do you do? And fast forward 10 or so years, we're now having a really similar conversation with Gen Z. So I suppose the thing to flag at the start is that this is a conversation that's gone on for a little while now. And well, I'll share a little bit of the presentation that we do, which is presenting a quote that says, "I see no hope for the future if it is up to the frivolous youth of today." And we say, where do you think this is from? And it's like 8th century BC or something. So it's a conversation, as I said, we've been having for a long time. And I guess, yeah, there are misconceptions. There are also realities and truths out there too. And so I guess in the session that we run, we invite managers to share a lot of, what are those frustrations that you're dealing with? What are the troubles that you're having? And we hear a lot of the same stuff a lot of the time. It's that they don't want to work hard. Or they want to work long hours, or they maybe lack resilience, or they're addicted to their phone, or they're entitled. And I could talk to all of those, and it's a big passion of mine, but I'll speak to the resilience one because I think it's a really interesting piece. I think I don't have a really clear, yes, they're resilient, no, they're not resilient. I've got sort of a look at the context which may have led to them appearing that way in the workforce. And that's what we do in this session, is kind of look at that context and go, well, how do we better understand these behaviors? I guess if we're left with just the behaviors, it's really hard to manage. But when we understand the behaviors a little bit better, we can work with that. We can understand what might motivate them. And so I guess there's 3 main things I'd point to. We all know social media is a really big part of this, and social media tells young people there's a lot of things to be afraid of. I've just been away for about 7 weeks and hadn't done a whole lot on social media. I went back on, and one of the first things I see is Iran bombing Israel. And so if you're a young person and you're on these social media platforms, it's not like it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, where you tune into the news. It's there no matter where you go. So whether it's that, whether it's crime, whether it's messaging that they're just not good enough, there's this ever-present access to information that is telling the young people that there is a lot out there to be scared of. And it's being presented in a really different way to how it has traditionally. I think the part that gets missed sometimes is that parents are also getting that too. They see all this same stuff. And so it's this 24/7, 365 day per year mess of really scary stuff. And so parents get scared too. And also on social media, there's this really judgmental kind of thing that can go on sometimes with parenting styles. How do you let them do this? What are you doing? And I feel for parents. And so I think you combine all of that and you get this big pendulum swing in parenting styles from what Gen X were used to then the way that Gen X have parented. And they've raised millennials and a lot of Gen Z who have a very involved parenting style. And so young people have formed this belief that, not in all cases clearly, but a lot of them, that the world is a pretty scary place and I'm not capable of dealing with it because it's not even anymore this helicopter parent thing that's going on. It's the lawnmower parent. It's like, I'm going to mow down any problem that you might have, any challenge that you might face. And so they're not actually getting that opportunity to build the resilience. So the good news is that where I think it is perhaps true that there is a lack of resilience in young people, the misconception is that that's just the way it is. I've seen some businesses through the work that we do have some incredible results when they build into their systems opportunities for those young people to get out of their comfort zone. It is tough, and it's a shame that workplaces are kind of the ones that are tasked with building that resilience. But what we see is that when workplaces do build that in and they create that psychological safety for those young people to take risks, the resilience comes, and it comes pretty quickly. And they end up thanking you later. They might hate you for sort of making them do something that feels really tough initially, but that growth comes really quickly. And so I think it's true that young people perhaps are lacking resilience, but like I said, I think it turns really quickly, and that's where I think the misconception comes. We're not locked into this. They've got a great capacity to grow in that sense. And so I'd encourage anyone to really embrace that and push those young people, because a lot of the time there's a really great payoff.
Thanks for sharing a little bit about Gen Z behaviors and particularly about resilience. And I want to continue this conversation a little bit more with Kate, with you. Hardie Grant has been around for quite some time, and it's a very diverse diverse employee base. You have baby boomers, you have Gen X, you have millennials, you have Gen Z. Can you tell us
whole
how
set.
you got everybody? How do you maintain this the balance between different generations, and how do you attract Gen Zs?
Really good question. I mean, we sort of, I guess, have a culture that feels a lot like a family, being started by founders who are genuinely a family. Their names on the wall. That's sort of been instilled in the way that we do things. It's always been a very people-led business, even before we, went into this grow-up phase and documenting things right from day dot. It's something that the board level and founder staff have been so passionate about, is nurturing people and ensuring, I guess, a great experience. These days, having an employee value proposition has become, or a strong value proposition has become, a bit of a hygiene factor. But I think, coming to Gen Zs and continuing on that thread, it can be a bit of a deal breaker for Gen Zs who are really looking for meaningful work and, I guess, a workplace that they belong. And so we do a lot of work trying to create a great space. We've actually designed a lease to move to the most fabulous office and building a sort of custom fit out in Collingwood next year. And it's very sustainable. It's got all the things that you'd be looking for, any generation, but particularly Gen Z, that just really wants something that's like purposeful and they feel like they're making an impact. I guess from what we've observed, Gen Z are sort of looking for some pretty key things. And so we try to focus on those. So one is this idea of flexible work that fits in their lives, but also considers them as a holistic overall person, and overall health, well-being is part of the conversation with them, not this separation of work and individual, and wanting that inclusive and authentic sort of workplace where empathy, vulnerability, and all of that is the norm. This concept's got on my radar about the idea of livable pay. And we published a book in Hardie Grant Publishing recently by Alison Pennington called Gen F, and just how challenging it is, I think, to be a younger millennial or a Gen Z trying to make your way in society today. I'll be honest, they sometimes do demand a lot coming into the workforce in COVID, where there was a bit of a swing towards candidates being able to demand very high salaries. They also like to take very long holidays. We've had a lot of Gen Zs take like 8-10 week breaks this year. Before, when we were talking, I was bringing these ideas of co-creation together, and Gen Z in particular really want a seat at the table for their voice to be heard. And I think that links back to doing that meaningful and purposeful work. And the other thing that's really important is the opportunity to grow and to develop, and whether it's, to Brian's point, trying to help them build resilience, or if it's more a technical skill that they really want to foster, just being able to make space for them to do that, I think, is quite important. So, I think that we're really focused on those things and they're almost universal. That's sort of important to every generation to have a lot of those things, but what you value might differ slightly. So if you're a parent, you might be a lot more focused on the flexibility to be able to manage your household, or you might have carers' responsibilities with an elderly sort of parent. So all of these things are pretty true. We've really excelled, I think, and have quite progressive policies. So when you think about us in the context of the media and publishing industry, we've got a really clear plan for flexible and hybrid working. One of the most popular benefits has become our summer hours, which sort of allows people to work a more compressed week and sort of have quite a flexi Friday or early finish sort of situation. And for me, I'm like, I just love routine, and my day every day is the same, and I'm happy with, like, not exactly 9 to 5, but the younger generation in particular are all signing up to, I'm going to get in early, I'm going to work a little bit later. And yeah, I want to have my 3-day weekend or sort of slide in to the weekend. So that's been really interesting to see. And we've brought in entitlements that you don't see in a lot of companies, particularly smaller ones, like menstruation leave, gender transition leave, expanding the definition of family to include kinship for our First Nations staff. The flexibility to float public holidays. So these things are becoming more common, but I think we were one of the first movers in our category. We spend a lot of time on onboarding our staff and removing sort of barriers. We've benchmarked salaries and all of that to make sure that we're offering quite a fair amount. But what we do a lot is investing in people to help them grow and making the space to learn. And it's so much more than training. That's probably 10 to 20% of it. I think it's just being able to be coached or to shadow or to get exposure and fumble your way through something so you get stronger and stronger and more confident. What else can I sort of talk about? I mean, there's so many things that we do. I guess, yeah, just maintaining our finger on the pulse and adapting, which was basically the framing of this conversation here, making sure that we understand what every generation's after and meeting those needs in a way that's sort of mutually beneficial.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's a very interesting. We got one question while you here just popped up, and why not maybe put it out for you, Kate. What hurdles have you overcome with your hybrid workplace when it comes to maintaining culture and developing authentic connections?
I think, yeah, I mean, the hurdles in a creative business, the greatest ideas and the greatest work comes actually from being together. So I think the greatest hurdle was finding ways to be able to do the work to the same level that you can when 100% of people were physically connected in an office. For us, though, funnily enough, this whole move into hybrid working has had more upside. We were not great at using things like Slack or Teams or Zoom or any of these technologies in the past. And the pandemic really accelerated our digital transformation and adoption. And it's just made it easier to actually work across offices, which is inherently hybrid. If you think about the fact there's always going to be a virtual component from someone beaming in from Sydney or Brisbane. So there's been a lot more upside. I can't really think of any other sort of challenges. I think it's really just about maintaining the creative work and finding ways and reasons for people to come in and connect and to value that time and see the benefit of being together for the work, and make it less about the physical place. I hope that answers your question.
I guess, yeah, they were happy. Reese was happy. Yeah, I guess how do you brainstorm when somebody's digital and not present? I guess it's the same. Just we have to sort of get used to it more.
Definitely.
Yeah, Deepak, did you come across any particular challenges in merging cultures with Uber and Car Next Door?
Yeah, there was a lot, to put it in the nicest possible way. Firstly, those differences in company size and structure So as I said, Uber's this 100,000 person machine, and Carshare was this 450 person remote first environment, and remote first from day one, and spread globally as well. So very different ways of working cultures, but also in integrating those cultures, Carshare was a team that was growing almost 30% year on year, where Uber was very public in saying we're going to keep our headcount flat. So how do you sort of bring those and manage that as well? But also that huge uncertainty with team members. So, how do you address those concerns of job security, role changes, cultural fit, and alongside that, I guess those varied processes, workflows, ways of working. But a big thing that also came out was that cultural identity. Can we preserve CarShare and Car Next Door's sort of unique identity within Uber's broader culture? I think they were the key ones that really stood out for me in my time there.
Yeah. And just wanted to also understand what was the time that took to drive this transition.
So CarShare was acquired 2 years ago or 3 years ago now. It was left to run, I wouldn't say run to its own devices, but do its thing within the Uber structure for 2 years. So the team was quite free to do its own thing with the support of a wider Uber team. Only after that 2 years, the business decided we're at a stage now we can accelerate and make this integration official or drive that. So the things that were done beforehand were proactive steps. So we knew this was going to happen. What can we do to, once again, make sure it wasn't a cliff for people to jump off? But when that integration and that button was pressed, it was everything to happen within roughly 2 months, 2 to 3 months. Looking back, it was an intense 2 to 3 months, but we had a lot of those processes and steps in place. So we aligned with values. So recognize which values within CarShare and Uber aligned. So for example, one that stands out, Car Next Door had a value of always finding a way. Uber's was go get it. So leading into those shared experiences are those things that made us the same. Um, and really emphasizing those best practices and bringing them into CarShare. So improving our parental leave policies and what we did. So people could, I guess, understand the new structure and then enhance opportunities and resources it could offer. But at the same time, in that lead up, in that 2 years, what traditions do we maintain? That is actually really important. So, what traditions could we preserve that, I guess, traditions and rituals that we could preserve that had a positive impact on the team and help maintain that sense of, I guess, familiarity and respect for the roots within this, I guess, new corporate environment. And then really using the tools we had and making tools. So making sure there's that continuous feedback and adaptation. So regularly collecting business data, feedback from our team, reprioritizing, refining our integration approach so that we could make, I guess, timely and meaningful adjustments so that we could facilitate the change and hopefully address the concerns of the people and do it with what would have the most impact and effect. We had a small team. We had to do it quickly. We had to focus on what would drive the right culture versus trying to do everything and anything and pulling our hair out.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. And well, look, we're a little bit over the time that we promised, 30 minutes. But Ryan is over there in a corner, and I'm not sure. Are you okay with one more question?
Yeah, 100%. Far away.
Um, we'll have one more person coming right now. Um, Can you share any insights of how Reach Foundation is working with young men to redefine the male stereotypes and address issues of toxic masculinity?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a bit of a change of pace here
Yeah.
with this, but thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. We've been working in that space for a really long time now and had a lot of incredible people who've developed a program that works with young men right at that sort of 15, 16-year-old age range that we know is pretty critical and where stuff can get pretty challenging, not only for them, but those around them as well. So What I would say is we've never seen a time like right now. We go into schools across Australia, and we see that it is a pretty challenging environment. I spoke to the social media side of things before. Young men are being smashed with all sorts of different media that says this is what it is to be a man. And I think when you are faced with being a really vulnerable, scared young man, you look at people like Andrew Tate and you see the power that they appear to hold, and you go, I want that because I feel like I don't have that. And so they take on those values. And what we try and do is go into those schools and say, all right, well, what is it to be a man? And we literally ask them that question. We go, like, as a group of dudes right here all together, of those of us who identify as male in this room, what is it to be a man? And you hear it's to be a provider, it's to be tough, cry, you don't show emotion, you play sport, you drink beer, like all of the stuff that you can imagine. We go, okay, all right. So this is like, we write it up on the board. We go, this is it. This is what it is to be a man. This is the complete list. And they sort of sit and nod at you and you go, okay, is this working? Like, do we think that this is working? And they sort of look at you blankly again. And we read out some stats on men in Australia right now. And one of those is that of the suicides, I think, in Australia in 2002, 3/4 of those were men. And so we go, with that, we kind of get the sense that maybe it's not working. And we ask them, has anyone been affected by any of these stats? And you'll get some really brave young dudes talking about how they might have lost an uncle or a parent or someone significant in their life. And we start to see a bit of that vulnerability. And from there we go, well, if the stereotype isn't working and we're hanging on to it so tightly and it's important to us, but we know it's not working, what could it look like? What are some behaviors we might have seen so far today that kind of goes against this? And we give them opportunities to kind of reshape and redefine that stereotype. And what we see is the young guys be really vulnerable, open up, talk about things that they don't always talk about, show a bit of that emotion, show a bit of that softness and practice a little bit of that softness. And you see them celebrate each other for it and go, this is what this can be. And so that's what we do, and that's what we really love doing, and it's worked. I mean, Harry Garside, people might be familiar with, as a young man who came through one of our programs, is now a professional boxer and does incredible stuff on social media. Have a look at Harry if you're not familiar with him. But equally, there as to the sort of difficult voices out there that are perpetuating really negative parts of the male stereotype. There are people like Harry out there who are trying to balance it, and that's what we try and do as well, is just redefine that male stereotype and find out what true sort of strength and power and courage looks like, as opposed to those traditional ideas that are just quite frankly not working.
Thanks for that. It was a little bit off question from the culture, but I suppose it's the people that will kind of start getting jobs pretty soon, and that's where they come from. It was kind of important to maybe touch base, since you and Wake Reach Foundation has had a lot of contact with the young men, and just wanted to ask that question. Well, thank you all for being here today. We've gone a little bit over. This is recorded, will be live. You can rewatch it and read it, and hope you learned something. Thank you for Friday hangs, and see you next week, next Friday, with NASA talking AR in space, if you're interested.
Thank you. Great chat, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
George. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.